My name's Lauren, and I just turned 15 when everything in my life changed. Let me tell you about my family. On the outside, we seemed like a normal family. Dad worked really hard, and Mom stayed home. I had a little sister, Olivia, who is 8 years younger than me. Dad was a manager at a big company that actually belonged to my grandmother on my mom's side. Grandma was a really ambitious woman. She started with some laundromats and later grew the business by making laundry detergents and household cleaning products. When she decided to retire, she offered the company to Mom, but Mom didn't want it, so Dad took over. That's when things started to get complicated. I remember the day everything fell apart. I was in my room trying to focus on my homework when I heard Mom yelling at Dad downstairs. "You're nothing but a loser, Frank. This is my house, my family's business. You should be thankful I let you run it." Things got worse in the weeks that followed. Mom and Dad barely spoke, and when they did, it always ended in a fight. I tried to keep Olivia busy, but even at 7 years old, she knew something was wrong. Then came the day that changed everything. I came home from school to find Dad standing in the living room with a suitcase by his feet. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking. "What's going on?" He walked over and pulled me into a tight hug. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," he said. "I can't stay here anymore. It's not good for anyone." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "But what about Olivia? What about me?" I asked. He pulled back, his eyes full of tears. "I love you both so much. Never forget that. But sometimes love just isn't enough." He kissed my forehead, then walked over to Olivia, who was watching with wide, confused eyes. He knelt down and hugged her tightly. "Be good for your big sister, okay, pumpkin?" And just like that, he was gone. The door closed behind him, leaving me feeling empty. Mom came home an hour later. When I told her Dad had left, she didn't seem surprised. She just nodded like she had been expecting it. "Good riddance," she muttered. "Mom," I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "How can you say that?" She turned to me with cold eyes. "Your father cheated on me, Lauren, over and over again." I couldn't take it anymore. That night, everything changed forever. I lay in bed and could hear Mom talking on the phone in her room. She was laughing, sounding happier than she had in months. I wondered who she was talking to, but I was too tired to care. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated after Dad left, Mom hit us with another surprise. One morning, while we were having breakfast, she announced, "I have some news. I'm getting married." I almost choked on my cereal. "What?" "Mom, Dad's only been gone for 3 months. She waved her hand like it was no big deal. "Sometimes true love happens unexpectedly, Lauren. You'll understand when you're older." 2 weeks later, Paul moved in. He was okay, I guess. He was tall and good-looking in a way that made people say, "Oh, he seems nice." But from the start, something about him didn't sit right with me. He made an effort with Olivia, playing games with her and helping with her homework, but with me, it felt like I didn't exist. Meanwhile, things were changing at the company, too. After Dad left, Mom took over, and she brought Paul in to work with her. They seemed to work well together, always talking about business plans. I tried to focus on my own life, school, friends, and the usual teenage stuff, but it was hard to shake the feeling that I was becoming invisible in my own family. Things got worse when Mom and Paul announced they were opening a new branch of the company in another city. One evening, Mom said, "We're moving. It's a great opportunity for the business." Then she added, "Paul and I have been talking, and we think it's best if you stay here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Stay here? Without you?" I asked, shocked. Mom quickly explained, "The new house won't have much space, and you're almost finished with school. It wouldn't make sense to transfer right before your exams." It felt like a punch to the stomach. "So where am I supposed to live? On the street?" I asked, trying not to cry. "Don't be dramatic, Lauren," Mom scolded. "You'll stay with your grandmother. She's already agreed to it." I stormed off to my room and slammed the door. As I lay on my bed, tears of anger and hurt ran down my face. I couldn't stop thinking, when did I become such a burden to my own mother? The next few weeks flew by, filled with packing boxes and goodbyes. Not for me, though. The tears were from Olivia, who didn't want to leave her friends behind. I helped Olivia pack, trying to stay cheerful for her sake. Will you come visit us, Laura? She asked, her big brown eyes filled with tears. I hugged her tightly. Of course I will, Squirt. You can't get rid of me that easily. The day they left, I stood on the porch with Grandma, watching as the moving van pulled away. Mom gave me a quick hug, and Paul gave an awkward nod. Then they were gone, taking Olivia with them. Living with Grandma wasn't as bad as I had imagined. She was pretty cool in her own way, giving me space when I needed it, but always there with a cup of tea and a kind ear when I wanted to talk. Still, it didn't feel like home. My 20th birthday came faster than I expected. That morning, I woke up feeling strange. I should have been excited, but all I felt was empty. Mom called, of course. Happy birthday, sweetie, she said, sounding overly cheerful. I'm sorry we can't be there. Work is just crazy right now. We'll celebrate next month when we visit, okay? I knew we wouldn't. They hadn't visited once since they moved. Sure, Mom. Sounds great. Grandma must have sensed how I was feeling, because she really went all out. She let me invite a few friends over, ordered my favorite food, and even baked a cake herself. For a few hours, I almost forgot about everything. The next morning, Grandma called me into her office. She had a serious look on her face that made my stomach drop. Sit down, Lauren, she said, pointing to the chair across from her desk. We need to talk. My mind raced. Oh no. Is she kicking me out? Where would I go? But then she smiled, reached into her desk drawer, and pulled out a small folder. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Open it. I did, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw what was inside. Grandma, is this? She nodded, her eyes sparkling. The company is yours now, Lauren. I see potential in you. You've got a good head on your shoulders, and I know you'll do right by the business. But Mom and Paul, they're running it now, I said, still in disbelief. Grandma's face tightened a little. They're running a branch. The main company, the heart of it all, that's yours now. I sat there, stunned. Me, barely 20, the owner of a multi-million-dollar company. It felt like a dream or maybe a nightmare. I don't know what to say. I finally managed. Grandma reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll give it your all. I nodded, still in shock. I will. I promise. She leaned back, satisfied. Good. Now, I have one more piece of advice for you, and I want you to listen carefully. I leaned in, hanging on to every word Grandma said. Call your father, she told me. There's more to the story than you know. Talk to him, even if it's just as a consultant, but hear him out. It took me a whole week to find the courage to call Dad. We decided to meet at a small cafe downtown. When I saw him, my heart tightened. He looked older, tired, but his eyes brightened when he saw me. There was an awkward silence at first, but then everything spilled out: the divorce, Mom's remarriage, the move, and Grandma's gift. Dad listened quietly, his face showing all kinds of emotions. When I finished, he took a deep breath. Laura, there's something you need to know about the divorce. Then he told me everything. How Mom never respected him, always putting him down and calling him a loser, making him feel worthless. He explained how, after a huge fight, he got drunk and made the biggest mistake of his life. I cheated on her, he admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. I regretted it right away, but your mother used it against me. She threatened to take everything, even you and Olivia. She wanted me to leave, give her all the property, and pay alimony. I sat there shocked. This didn't sound like the Mom I thought I knew. Why didn't you fight it? I asked. Dad looked at me with sadness and love in his eyes. Because of you and Olivia. I didn't want you both to go through a messy, public divorce. I thought this would be easier. As we talked, it felt like a huge weight was lifted off my chest. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had my dad back. Before we left, I took a deep breath and asked, Dad, how would you feel about helping me with the company as a consultant? His smile was all the answer I needed. The next few months were a whirlwind. I studied for exams, spent long nights cramming, and before I knew it, I was standing on stage at my high school graduation with a diploma in hand. Grandma was in the audience, smiling proudly. Mom and Paul were nowhere to be seen, but by then, I'd learned not to expect much from them. As summer came, I focused on college applications. With Grandma's support and Dad cheering me on from afar, I aimed high. When the acceptance letters started arriving, I could hardly believe it. But the biggest surprise came when I opened the financial aid package for my top choice. Full ride. I stared at the letter in disbelief. Grandma cheered and pulled me into a hug. I knew you could do it, kiddo. All those late nights and competitions paid off. I decided to major in business management. It seemed like the smart choice, especially now that I had the company to think about. I now had a company to run, and the idea still felt unreal, but I was determined to make Grandma proud. To celebrate my college acceptance, Grandma decided to throw a small party. Just the two of us. We got some fancy takeout, and a bottle of sparkling cider. Grandma wasn't about to let me drink champagne, even though I was an adult now. We were halfway through dinner when the doorbell rang. Grandma frowned, clearly not expecting anyone. "I'll get it," I said, putting down my fork. When I opened the door, my stomach sank. There stood my mother and Paul, looking annoyed and impatient. Before I could say anything, they pushed past me into the house. Mom didn't waste time on greetings. "Mother, we need to talk about the company. Now." I stood there, stunned, as Mom launched into a rant. She didn't even look at me, didn't ask about my graduation or college. It was like I wasn't even there. "Why can't we access the main accounts?" she demanded. "And why are you blocking the transfer of funds to our branch?" Grandma's expression hardened. "Because it's not your decision anymore, Kelly. The company belongs to Lauren now. She's the one who will decide its future and manage its finances." The room went silent. I could feel the tension hanging in the air. After Grandma's words, I saw a wave of emotions cross Mom's face. First shock, then anger, and finally, something calculating. Suddenly, her whole attitude shifted. "Lauren, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with fake kindness. "I've missed you so much. Why don't you come live with us?" I blinked, caught off guard by this sudden change. Mom stepped closer, reaching out like she wanted to touch my arm. Instinctively, I stepped back. "We've settled so nicely in the new city. We have a beautiful house, and there's a room just for you. We could set up a desk and get you a new computer for your studies and work." "No, Mom," I said firmly. "I'm happy here. I have my friends, my school, and Grandma needs me." Mom's smile wavered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Well, if that's the issue, we could always move back here. We could live in our old house, just like before. Wouldn't that be nice?" I shook my head. "It's not about the house, Mom. It's about everything." I could see the anger building in her eyes, barely contained. Before she could say anything, I decided to ask the question that had been burning inside me for months. "Mom, why did you really divorce Dad?" She froze, taken aback. "Well, your father, he cheated on me. Multiple times. I got tired of it. He left us for his mistress and didn't even pay alimony." "That's not true," I said quietly. I said, "Dad told me everything. It only happened once, and it was because of how you treated him. He didn't abandon us, you kicked him out. And he's been paying alimony regularly." Mom's face twisted with anger. "How dare you? You ungrateful little brat. You have no right to interfere in my personal life. Everything here is mine, and I decide who lives where." Grandma, who had been quietly watching, finally stepped forward. Her voice was calm but firm, stronger than I had ever heard before. "That's enough, Kelly," she said. "You seem to have forgotten a few things. This house, the company, they belong to me, not you. I gave the company to Lauren because I trust her judgment more than yours right now. I think it's time for you to leave." I watched with mixed emotions as Grandma firmly escorted Mom and Paul out of the house. The door clicked shut behind them, and I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. I had lost something today, the last bit of hope I had about my mother. But I gained something, to a clear sense of my future and the comfort of knowing I wasn't alone. "What now?" I asked, my voice muffled against Grandma's shoulder. She pulled back and gave me a small smile. Now, we get back to celebrating your college acceptance. And tomorrow, we start planning for your real future, not the one your mother tried to force on you. The next morning, after the confrontation with Mom and Paul, I woke up to the sound of voices downstairs. Curious, I crept down the stairs and peeked into the living room. To my surprise, Dad was sitting on the couch, deep in conversation with Grandma. I sat down next to them, and Grandma explained why she had called Dad over. I've been thinking about Olivia, she said. Your mother, well, I'm not sure she's in the best position to care for her right now. I've suggested your father seek custody of Olivia. I felt a surge of hope. Really? Dad, are you going to do it? He ran his hand through his hair, looking both nervous and determined. Yeah, I am. It won't be easy, but Olivia deserves better than what she's getting now. I couldn't help it. I threw my arms around him. Thank you, Dad. As we pulled apart, Grandma cleared her throat. There's more, she said. I've hired a private investigator to look into your mother and Paul's affairs. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a strange, new rhythm. I started my college classes, diving into my studies with a focus I had never felt before. Dad started coming over regularly, and we worked on fixing our relationship. It felt good to have him back in my life. Then, about 2 weeks after that conversation, Grandma called us both over. Her face was serious as we sat down. The investigator's report came in, she said, getting straight to the point. And it's worse than we thought. She laid out the facts, each one hitting me like a punch. Mom had been cheating on Dad for years, long before the divorce. Her affair with Paul had started while she was still married to Dad. There were hotel receipts, records of expensive gifts, all of it painting a clear picture. But that wasn't even the worst part. Paul is a con man, Grandma said, her voice firm. He's done this before. He charms wealthy women, convinces them to move their money, and then runs off with it. I felt sick. So, when they wanted to move the company's money, Grandma nodded. Exactly. He was planning to steal it and disappear. We sat in silence, each lost in our thoughts. Finally, Grandma said we needed to confront Mom with the truth. We set the meeting for the next day. Mom arrived at Grandma's house, looking annoyed and impatient. Her expression changed when she saw Dad was there too. What followed was one of the hardest conversations I've ever been part of. Grandma laid out all the evidence, the affair, Paul's history of fraud, and his plan to steal from the company. With each piece of information, I watched Mom's face, hoping to see some guilt or understanding. But all I saw was denial. This is ridiculous, Mom said, sounding defensive. Paul loves me. He would never do that. You're all just jealous of our happiness. Dad tried to reason with her. Kelly, please look at the facts. Think about Olivia. Is this the kind of man you want around our daughter? But Mom wouldn't listen. She stood up, her face red with anger. I don't have to listen to this. Paul is a good man, and I trust him completely. You're all just trying to ruin my life. With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. As we sat there, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a long, hard battle. But looking at Dad and Grandma, I knew I wasn't facing it alone. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional ups and downs. With Grandma's strong support and her legal expertise, Dad filed for custody of Olivia. I tried to stay focused on my studies, but it was hard not to get distracted by everything happening around me. The day of the custody hearing came, and I insisted on being there. The whole thing was tough. Mom's lawyer tried to make Dad look like he wasn't involved in our lives, but our lawyer was ready. He showed proof of Dad's regular alimony payments, how he had tried to keep in touch with us, and the stable life he had now. Then came the big shock. The private investigators' report about Paul's criminal past and their plan to steal from the company. I watched Mom's face as the truth came out first. She looked shocked, then angry, and finally, lost. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. When the judge gave full custody of Olivia to Dad, I felt a mix of emotions, relief that Olivia would be safe, but also sadness that it had come to this. As we left the courthouse, Olivia in Dad's arms, Mom approached us. This isn't over, she hissed, her eyes full of anger. Grandma stepped in between us. Yes, Kelly, it is. Go home. Things only got worse for Mom after that. The judge ordered her to pay child support to Dad for Olivia. It was a huge shock for her, since she'd always thought she'd be the one receiving support, not paying it. I threw myself into my studies and learning more about the company, trying to stay away from the family drama. But I couldn't help feeling a bit satisfied when I heard that Paul had left Mom, running off with another woman and a large chunk of Mom's personal savings. One evening in autumn, Dad called me. His voice was tense with emotion. "Your mother showed up at my place today," he said. "She wants to make up, said she made a mistake, and wants us to be a family again." My heart tightened. Part of me, a small part, wanted him to say yes, wanted things to go back to how they used to be. But I knew better now. We'd all been through too much. I told her no, Dad said firmly. I told her that ship sailed a long time ago and that I wouldn't put you or Olivia through that again. I let out a breath. I didn't realize I was holding. "Good," I said, surprised at how strong my voice sounded. "You deserve better, Dad. We all do." There was a pause, and then Dad spoke again. I could hear him smiling. "When did you get so wise, Laura?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. "I learned from the best." After I hung up the phone, I looked around my room at Grandma's house. My textbooks were scattered across the desk next to a stack of company reports, and photos of me with Dad and Olivia smiled back from the bulletin board. This wasn't the life I imagined a year ago. It wasn't perfect, there was still a lot to figure out and plenty of challenges ahead, but it was real. It was mine. I thought about Mom, now alone after all her plans and manipulations. I felt a little pity, but it was mostly replaced by a sense of justice. She made her choices, and now she had to deal with the consequences. As for me, I had a family that loved me, a company to run, and a future full of possibilities. It wasn't the path I expected, but standing at the start of my new life, I realized something important. Time flew by as I balanced college and managing a multi-million-dollar company. Before I knew it, I was halfway through my degree, buried in textbooks and financial reports. The weekdays were filled with lectures and late-night study sessions, but the weekends were sacred. Every Sunday, I packed my bag and headed home to Dad and Olivia. The moment I walked in, Olivia would run to me, yelling, "Laura," and tackle me with a hug. At 12, she was all long legs and boundless energy. Dad would step out of the kitchen, usually wearing an apron, just in time for dinner. He'd grin and say, "Just in time for a meal." Those weekends became my anchor. We'd eat dinner together, with Olivia excitedly talking about her week at school, while Dad and I discussed the company. After Olivia went to bed, Dad and I would often stay up late, going over business strategies. Thursdays were always spent at Grandma's, where she cooked up a feast, filling the house with the smell of roast chicken and apple pie. After lunch, we'd sit on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. "I always knew you had it in you, Lauren," Grandma would say, squeezing my hand. As graduation got closer, I felt both excited and nervous. Dad, true to his word, was running the company smoothly while also preparing me to take over. One evening, he told me, "I'm ready to hand over the reins whenever you are." I hugged him tightly.
"Thank you, Dad."
For everything. Life wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges ahead, decisions to make and a company to manage. But as I looked at my little family, Dad, Olivia, and Grandma, I knew we could face anything together.